Theories underlying user experience. Take a look at the image on the screen. Which lines look longer to you? Line A or line B? Most people may say line B looks longer, simply because the points are facing in, rather than out. However, these lines are exactly the same length, which you'd see if you used a ruler to measure them. There's a reason why this occurs, in which I will discuss in this presentation. I will be discussing two theories underlying user experience: the perception and navigation. Perception and navigation are two important abilities that people possess. Perception is concerned with how we come to know an environment through our senses. Navigation is concerned with how we move through environments. In order to receive information from the environment, we are equipped with sense organs such as eye, ear, and nose. Each sense organ is part of a sensory system which receives sensory inputs and transmits sensory information to the brain. Visual perception is the brain's ability to receive, interpret, and act upon visual stimuli. It can perceive our surroundings through the light that enters our eyes and learn new information. Some argue that perceptual processes are not direct, but depend on the perceiver's expectations and previous knowledge as well as the information available in the stimulus itself. In 1966, psychologist James Gibson has proposed a direct theory of perception, a bottom-up theory. In 1970, Richard Gregory has proposed a constructivist, indirect, theory of perception, a top-down theory. Gibson argued that perception is a constructive process which relies on top-down processing. For Gregory, perception is a hypothesis, which is based on prior knowledge. In this way, we are actively constructing our perception of reality based on our environment and stored information. According to Gregory, perceptions can be ambiguous. First, take a look at the Necker cube. Then focus on the circled area. What have you noticed? When you stare at the crosses on the cube, the orientation can suddenly change or flip. It becomes unstable, and a single physical pattern can produce two perceptions. Gregory argued that this object appears to flip between orientations because the brain develops two equally plausible hypotheses and is unable to decide between them. When the perception changes, though there is no change of the sensory input, the change of appearance cannot be due to bottom-up processing. It must be set downwards by the prevailing perceptual hypothesis of what is near and what is far. Perception allows behavior to be generally appropriate to non-sensed object characteristics. For example, we respond to certain objects as though they are doors, even though we can only see a long narrow rectangle as the door is ajar. What we have seen so far would seem to confirm that indeed we do interpret the information that we receive. In other words, perception is a top-down process. Bottom-up processing theory. James Gibson argues that perception is direct, and not subject to hypotheses testing as Gregory proposed. There is enough information in our environment to make sense of the world in a direct way. For Gibson, sensation is perception, what you see is what you get. There is no need for processing, interpretation, as the information we receive about size, shape and distance is sufficiently for us to interact directly with the environment. The optic array contains invariant information that remains constant as the observer moves. Invariants are aspects of the environment which don't change. There is no need for unconscious inference or hypothesis testing. As we drive down a road, the environment appears to flow out and past us as we move. Depth perception is the ability to see things in three dimensions, including length, width and depth, and to judge how far away an object is. The primary depth cues are: 1. Retinal disparity. It is defined as the way that your left eye and your right eye view slightly different images. 2. Stereopsis. It is the process by which the different images of the world received by each eye are combined to produce a single three-dimensional experience. 3. Accommodation. This is a muscular process by which we change the shape of the lens in our eyes in order to create a sharply focused image. 4. Convergence. Over distances of 2 to 7 meters, we move our eyes more and more inwards to focus on an object at these distances. This process of convergence is used to help provide additional distance information. Secondary depth cues, also called monocular depth cues, rely on only one eye as the basis for the perception of depth on flat visual displays. Light and shade. The distribution of light and shadows is a monocular cue which can be seen by only one eye. Light and shadows can also highlight three-dimensional elements from a two-dimensional image. Linear perspective. Linear perspective is a depth cue that is related to both relative size and the next depth cue, texture gradient. Height in horizontal plane. Distant objects appear higher than nearby objects. Overlap. An object which obscures the sight of another is understood to be nearer. Motion parallax. Motion parallax refers to the difference in image motion between objects at different depths. Texture gradient. When you're looking at an object that extends into the distance, such as a grassy field, the texture becomes less and less apparent the farther it goes into the distance. Relative size. Smaller objects are usually seen as being further away, particularly if the objects in the scene are of approximately the same size. A perceptual set refers to a predisposition to perceive things in a certain way. In other words, we often tend to notice only certain aspects of an object or situation while ignoring other details. Factors affecting perception are expectations, experience, affect and demolition, motivation, individual differences, and culture. The Gestalt theory of perception attempts to explain the way the human brain interprets information about relationships and hierarchy in a design or image based on visual cues like proximity, similarity, and closure. Proximity. Objects tend to be grouped together if they are close to each other. Continuity. We tend to perceive smooth, continuous patterns rather than disjointed, interrupted ones. Closure. Visual connection or continuity between sets of elements which do not actually touch each other in a composition. Similarity. Objects tend to be grouped together if they are similar. Figure ground perception holds that we tend to separate images into figure, or object, and ground, or background. Non-visual perception is a perceptual consciousness beyond vision. Auditory perception could be defined as the ability to receive and interpret information that reached the ears through audible frequency waves transmitted through the air or other means. Haptic perception means literally the ability to grasp something. Perception in this case is achieved through the active exploration of surfaces and objects by a moving subject, as opposed to passive contact by a static subject during tactile perception. Smell and taste. A smell is created when a substance releases molecules, particles, into the air. For us to detect the smell, those molecules need to enter our nose. The more volatile the substance is, the more easily it gives off molecules, the stronger its smell. Taste is experienced through the taste buds in the mouth, and in Western views, was originally considered to have 4 states: sweet, salty, sour and bitter. But Eastern traditions have included a 5th, umami, which translates roughly as savory or brothy. Now we have learned visual and non-visual perception is concerned about how we know an environment through our senses. Navigation, however, is concerned with how we move through environments. 3 related navigation activities are: 1. Object identification. Concerned with finding categories and clusters of objects spread across environments. 2. Exploration. Focuses on understanding what exists in an environment and how the things are related. And 3. Wayfinding. Concerned with how people work out how to reach their destination. A good, clear signposting of spaces is critical in the design of spaces. There are 3 primary types of sign that designers can use. Informational signs provide information on objects, people and activities, and hence aid object identification and classification. Directional signs provide route and survey information. They do this often through sign hierarchies, with one type of sign providing general directions being followed by another that provides local directions. Warning and reassurance signs provide feedback or information on actual or potential actions within the environment. Maps and guides. Maps provide information and help people explore, understand, and find their way through spaces. Supplemented with additional detail about the objects and the environment, they become guides.